stage voice.
We ready to get started? Do we have
Richard, I did have to let you know if you don't have quorum, I do have to go to a dental appointment, like 45 minutes, so.
Well,
Let's have a fast meeting.
One, two, we have a quorum. The city does. Does the school board have a quorum?
We don't need a quorum, that's only a committee meeting.
Just
For
3
us.
members.
Okay.
So, but we do have to open our committee meeting as under law.
I'm here to listen and make.
Okay. Then we'll go ahead and start this meeting. The city does have a quorum to proceed with this study session. And second of all, we'll open it, allow the school board to do what they need to do so they can be official. Go ahead. Ms. Bellinger?
Yes, we would like to welcome the audience and thank you for attending. The committee has set aside this time for public comment. Individuals addressing the board shall have 1 opportunity to speak during comment and shall be limited to 3 minutes each. Individuals should not make personal attacks unrelated to actions affecting the school system. We strongly encourage common courtesy and constructive feedback. Detailed rules and procedures, including a complaint process, are outlined in Board Policy 0167.3. Megan, do we have public comment? Okay. All right. We have no public comment. We can proceed.
We have 2 items on our collective agenda for our study session. The first one deals with the discussion of a school resource officer. So I'll turn it over to, whom do we want to, I'll turn it over to.
Start briefly and then.
You can start briefly and turn it over to there. Take it.
Thank you, Mayor and Commission and TCAPS members for being here and doing a lunchtime study session. We were approached by TCAPS Superintendent Van Wagner about their interest in bringing the SRO program back to the high school. And they've received grant dollars in order to help facilitate that. It would cover 50% of the position. My previous work in the city of Brighton, we had very successful history with the SRO programs. We had great officers go through there that built a lot of really strong relationships with the kids that went there. We saw a lot of the good that comes out of it. It's not all just public safety. A lot of it's mentoring, a lot of it's just being someone to look up to. So we had a really good experience with that. On the staff side today, we have Chief O'Brien and soon-to-be interim Chief Matt Richmond here joining us to provide any questions or response to any questions you may have. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to Superintendent Van Wagner and his team to kind of kick off the discussion.
Okay, thank you for the opportunity today. This is a journey that goes back a little bit. This is the end of my 3rd year here in TCAPS, and soon in the opportunity, in the position, I had the chance to meet with Chief O'Brien and have different discussions, and this was one of the discussions I had in my former district, 4 years in Alpena. On the other side of the state, we had school resource officers at both our high school and our middle school that I had a great working relationship with. I felt like there was a lot of success of working with kids in a positive way. We ran a DARE program, for instance, with the SROs with all of our elementary students. We had, they were very active participants, even had one that coached in our districts, and really just saw the positive aspects of it with the goal really to build the relationships to have less incidents across the school district was our goal, and to have relationships where kids felt comfortable to go talk to somebody in our law enforcement community that maybe they weren't exposed to or didn't have that opportunity before. And so the state of Michigan has recently over the last few years had a state police school safety grant, and last year they added specifically a grant for school resource officers. So we applied for that grant, and we did receive it. We did apply for multiple positions for many of our schools, but unfortunately, we received one, and at this point, we do have some support from Garfield Township for West High School and West Middle School with a community police officer. It really is not an SRO position. It doesn't have the level of training and the level of types of things we'd love to have for an SRO. At the same point, we haven't had the funds, and that's something that Garfield Township has completely supplied at this point. I think that's something that will grow ever, and if we can find the funds, I think that's something we'd be interested in having. But to have some type of presence within the city, Central High School is our one secondary building that we have within the city limits. And so we've, at this point, with the grant funds, we wanted to make sure that our two comprehensive high school had some level of support. And this would be reinstating really the true SRO program with the proper training, with the proper things with that. And I think that our relationship with city, my relationship with Chief O'Brien has been phenomenal throughout his time and opportunities when we have had incidences and those things. But, you know, there have been situations where we've had kids that maybe there was something that happened with a written threat, something that unfortunately some kids are just looking for attention in those things. And when a brand new officer, you know, that they've never met walks in, it's kind of hard for a conversation. It's very intimidating. Where in my past with opportunities with a known officer that's in that building and committed to that, and that kids have seen at football games, seen during pep assemblies, seen during so many of those kind of good events and the positive things, that they are able to maybe build a relationship and just know that face, know that person. It makes it less intimidating in positive situations, but also when we do have type of negative situations that we do have to work law enforcement on. So this has been a great opportunity. We've had a lot of discussions with our Board of Education on it. We are very, very open to any type of training or opportunities to make sure that we have the right person. I know in our boards here, we have 3 members of our board here. We have Josie, Holly, and Beth are with us. We've had lots of conversations about making sure that the right person is in that spot. We think that that is important to all of us. Also have Patrick McManus, who's our newest member, our school and safety coordinator for the district. We also have Jessie Houghton with us. She is the principal of Central High School. And so collectively, we've had a lot of conversations about wanting to make sure this is done right. And so we are interested in the conversation with the city leadership to have an opportunity with these funds, and just to make sure that it's very open dialogue and that expectations are very clear and what positive opportunity this could possibly bring. So with that, I'll
add on
open
that. I think the thing I'd really like to just touch on is the relationship piece to this. When I was in Brighton, I had the opportunity to shadow our school resource officer, and most of those kids in that high school, of 500 or 600 kids, she knew them by first name. And when an issue happened, I happened to be there when an issue happened, and to see the response difference and to see how the kids open up. And I think ultimately, if Central High is going to move forward in this manner, I think it's important that that relationship be with the City of Traverse City Police Department, not some other avenue, whether it's private or public. It's an asset within our community, and I think it's a really good role for us to play to enhance that partnership with the school. Yeah, I'd like to turn it back over to you.
I've had the experience of a resource officer in a previous life when I was the manager. I just can recall having to walk through the school twice a year, not having to, I chose to walk through the school twice a year with Dennis Pageant. But I watched, not so much in the kids and the respect that he had, especially for those that he found a way to have a hobby with those kids, and they got into remodeling cars and doing things like that, but found a way to have a relationship. In my humble experience, I think Dennis Pageant had more of a change in how to deal with kids than what the kids had to deal with a police officer. So I think it was a two-way street for those many number of years. my daughters didn't care too much for me walking through the high school with a police officer by my side. They said it made it tough to get dates, but other than that, that was their problem. I just kept telling me it was, mission was accomplished, so there you go. I think the school resource officer is a positive thing. I know we all got a copy of a study that was forwarded to us by a member of the city commission. He's coming in now, so he may want to address what he rests. We're talking about the resource officer. Yes, is there violence in the school? There is. Will there be violence with or without a resource officer? There very well could be. We hope that it doesn't happen. We pray it doesn't happen. But I think there's other formats, there's other positives, more positives to be gained than there is and negative. So I, for one, of course, I'm just one vote, would like to see this move forward to the best of our ability. So I've just given my 2 cents worth, and I know the officers that are here have been a long time, so they've had experience watching the SRO officers, so they can address that on their own. So I want to open it up to our chief and our soon-to-be interim chief if they have any thoughts or discussions.
Hi, Jeff O'Brien, Traverse City Police Chief for 5 more days.
You're lucky.
I don't think you have that power, Mayor, with all due respect. Let's go on a positive note. Please just understand this, that you cannot judge this school resource officer by my generation of cop. They're not the same officer that you're accustomed to, that you went to school with. DARE is not something that we're going to implement. We're not going to teach that. I taught DARE. It was, and no disrespect to Dr. John or to Alpena, but it was really deemed that it didn't work. It was more of a gateway introduction than it was trying to do a prevention. What we've done now, and what's been very successful, is peer support. And through a drug coalition that I've been on in the county, I did have an opportunity to participate in Kingsley School, where they had an alternative day, where basically the kids just got in the gymnasium and they came up with ways to problem solve, how they're going to get across from one part of the gym to the other, using cardboard and mats and teamwork, and emphasizing there's alternatives, activities than doing drugs or alcohol. Everything that we've done in our police department within the last 8 years, it's been involved with team policing and bringing in other entities as far as crisis intervention teams. We have a social worker that we utilize for the homeless, substance use disorder. That same type of philosophy is going to happen with this school resource officer. And one thing I know about being a community police officer, being a police officer for 32 years, I don't have all the answers, but I'm in a really good position to bring people to the table that have the answers and that can problem solve. So I envision this position, this school resource officer, as a catalyst to have team meetings on an individual that may be on the cusp of going into the juvenile delinquent programs, teachers, educators, principals, nurses, social workers. The police department is there for support with the prosecuting attorney. It's a micro level. It's an application of a micro level of one kid and what can we do for that individual. That's my envision of it. That's if I was going to stay around. And I think Richmond probably would have that same type of philosophy. So please, if I can just get any emphasis, don't even think about your old school resource officer that you had in school, because this is not the same type of school resource officer. It's a different generation. Thank you. Yeah.
morning, Matt Richmond, Traverse City Police. A lot of what Chief O'Brien said, I agree with wholeheartedly. I was a school resource officer briefly for several months at the high school, and just the relationships that you develop in that time goes a long way. I see school resource officers that are now back on the road, and students that have graduated come back, hey, you were my school resource officer. I remember this. I remember when we did this. This is about what's best for the children, best for the students in our school, and the team approach is 100% the way to go. They are a small part of what happens. To sit down with Mr. McManus and the safety team and come up with ways to prevent and make the school a safer place, to sit down with educators and just talk about what we can do to better the students' education, their experience in school, just being there on a daily basis and having those non-law enforcement contacts, going up and maybe shooting hoops with a kid or going in the weight room or just sitting down and talking at lunch, having lunch with them. You get to know these individuals. And when there's a change in personality or a change in behavior or they're going through something, you see that. And you can act right now. And maybe talk to them and say, is something bothering you? Something going on? What can we do to help you? And these are the things that we can do to prevent things that happen in the future by understanding the relationships that we have with these kids. And it goes a long way to building trust. Having them come to us in a time of need and say, hey, this is what's going on, or I talk to another individual and this is what's going on, I'm a little concerned. We can address that. We can go to the administration. Hey, I think we have an issue we need to address right now. The credibility of the school resource officer with the prosecutor's office, or even our administration in our department. If there is a threat or somebody says a comment, we can go to that school resource officer and ask about that individual. What's the credibility level of this? Is this something that they kind of do on a normal basis? We have a school resource officer with Northwest Ag. We have a proven track record. And every time she calls, I ask, what's her opinion? The prosecutor asks what's her opinion when we go forward if it goes into the court system. We have diversionary programs now with community mental health and in the courts. We want to do what's best for the students, and if we can do that in a team approach, that's the best thing for the kids.
From the city commission, any other thoughts from the city commission?
Not thoughts, but I have questions. So, questions and thoughts. So I appreciate that this started out with some testimonials, but I think when this was last brought before the city commission, there were some testimonials to the opposite effect. So I appreciate Chief and Captain Richmond coming out and saying, set all that aside. This is a totally different position and a different function. And the week after we had that, we had the contract for Jenny Lynn Oster at the school where she's at now come before us. And I think we were able to get a little bit better of a picture of what this new, I guess we still call them SROs. That's something, if I had my way, I would change because it doesn't sound like they operate in the same way that that's always been. So I guess I'm curious for either Chief O'Brien or Captain Richmond to come up and kind of, would have liked to have had Jenny Lynn here, but she's probably working right now at the school. So explain how, you kind of talked about there's activities you can do to gain trust, there's intervention, but really, we've had somebody in the field doing this, so maybe giving us some examples of how that day looks like or how that process looks like, because I do share some of the concerns of the past with some commissioners and other people, but I have heard such amazing things about the program we have going as our officer trained with our community policing methods that does give me a little bit more inclination to support. So I'd like to hear a little bit more about kind of more specifics, maybe more of an outline, like what the person who will be taking this job would have in their job description.
Well, I think right off the bat is we have that successful program. We have that outline, Northwest Ed. And that's a model that's working I think each and every one of you have heard from them during that contract negotiations and the support that she has within that. You know,
We do have one new commissioner since then, so you can get a little into the details. So
Okay.
Ms. Walter is not with us. She was there last time.
So, I mean, that job description it's not there to be a disciplinary through the school. They're not there to enforce or be the school's disciplinary agent. They're there to educate, prevent crime, and to provide law enforcement duties to investigate criminal acts that occur on TCAP's property. Like I said, educational pieces coming up with different programs, whatever those may be. We have a social worker now with our department. That role will maybe grow in the future. She's had some experience within the schools that can shed some light on sitting down and having groups of students come and having a discussion about mental health or situations that are going on in their life. And knowing that there's other individuals in the school that are going through the same things that they are, and then can help bridge the gap and help explain or help educate others. Law enforcement officer will have their expertise in talking with staff on how to better prepare a school, different safety aspects. Again, it's a law enforcement, there's not a set way on how things are going to go every single day. It kind of determines the day of, okay? If there's a problem out in the parking lot or there's a problem with speeding, they might address that. They might come into the school and, spend the first half of their day talking to individuals that are having issues, or sitting down and having lunch, or speaking or talking with Pat McManus about the upcoming football game, supervising and making sure that there's proper security there and there's law enforcement present to handle those situations. There's a lot of different things. The training through the National Association of School Resource Officers, is education. They're a mentor and informal counseling. We have trainings like Chief O'Brien said, crisis intervention, peer support. And then lastly, the law enforcement aspect of it. There are going to be times when kids commit a crime that have to be dealt with by law enforcement. That's going to happen. That's only one part of the the school resource officer's job. A bigger part is the education and the prevention of things happening down the way. And just building that trust, having those opportunities to sit and talk to individuals, to staff, about how we can handle things differently. Some of the policies that they may develop, we could have some input on that and how it would affect students or how it would affect us dealing with situations in the school. And the big thing is the consistency, Dr. Van Wagner said. Knowing the kids and how to deal with them, how to approach them. Do I have to be stern? Do I have to be firm? Or can I go in? Do I have to sit down and coddle them a little bit more than that? Another officer responding to a call is not going to know that individual, not going to know how to deal with that situation in a way that may not escalate that, okay? We're trained to de-escalate situations. Those officers would have that training. And we have the support of the administration and the other team members that can come in and help. So I can't give you a blow by blow of how a day's going to go. It all depends on what's going on that day.
Well, that was more of the detail I was
Yeah.
looking for, so I appreciate it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
I am the new board member, but I was a teacher, and I was a teacher from the late 70s when it was full-out law enforcement in the hallway in a school in Cicero, Illinois. I found it very intimidating. I'm sure the kids did as well. I really appreciate that Chief O'Brien said that is a different beast than what we're looking at today. When I taught in Ithaca downstate, it was a totally different matter, and there was nothing more wonderful than seeing the resource officer in the cafeteria at a table with usually boys who needed that kind of mentorship. It was wonderful. I was also a fifth grade teacher. I had to suffer through DARE. Really happy to know that that's not going to happen anymore. So my questions are really with Mr. McManus and maybe with you guys. I'm not sure where I feel about full garb, gun on the hip, versus plain clothes, and how we feel about that in the schools. Mr. McManus, where are you in all this?
So that's obviously something we'd have to speak with the city about and some of the policy. Since it is new to us right now, I feel like, right, some of the uniforms these days they've got all the
like
stuff
right
on
here.
and it's just, it's kind of off-putting. So I would definitely be open to the discussion, obviously, with the administration and the police department for maybe reducing some of these. It really is going to be scary. So reducing. But I'm definitely all about doing that discussion.
So that hasn't been determined. What do you think is missing? I don't know what your job is. What is missing, or what does this do to enhance your mission?
Captain Richmond definitely mentioned a lot of the things. That's just developing the relationship, not only with the schools, with the city police, but also just law enforcement in general with the students. I was a law enforcement officer for almost 20 years before I had this job. And some of my biggest wins were just developing relationships with younger generations, going, wow, yeah, police are not. What maybe we see on TV is pretty scary. But, wow, yeah, no, I know this person now. And I did the same thing. I helped coach some teams, and kids were on those. I wasn't a school resource officer, but, boy, those connections go a long way. And to this day, I've run into some of these kids who are not kids anymore, who go, wow, yeah, thank you for approaching me at a time that I'm just having a bad day, and being able to approach you as a law enforcement officer just went a long way. So I know in my heart, that's where this person, and that's something that I know I can speak on behalf of TCAPS and say they very much believe.
Just to expound upon the group, there is a lot of this, even the selection of the SRO is a team effort here. It takes the right person to do this job, other than, just law enforcement to go into the schools to deal with students every single day. That's not for everyone. And that's one of the biggest first steps that we need to do, is make sure that we have that person in place that's really going to benefit the students, benefit the staff, and do the job that we're expected to do within the schools. And a lot of that will come from the schools itself. TCAPS will have a big part in that. And that's part of Northwest Edge, and that's part of the contract, is to have that team approach. And the uniform right now in Northwest Ed, Jenny Lynn does not wear any uniform right now. She's in plain clothes.
Plain clothes.
I would not have someone in full uniform. Now, does that say that won't happen here and there for whatever reason? Maybe a situation calls for that, and they have that versatility. Or, at the minimum, a polo that, says something. But when I was there, it was plain clothes, it was business casual, looked professional. As far as the rest of the uniform, being armed and things of that nature we talked about, you have to have the tools with you in case that unfortunate situation happens. Okay, and to send a law enforcement officer in there and something happens where they're not armed and they can't prevent that because their weapons out in the car or out in their or back in the office, then that's an unfortunate situation. So, but I mean, there's ways to cover that up. A lot of the school resource officers that come in have vests on that, I should say that the fleece vest or whatever to kind of cover that up. But it gets people, kind of used to law enforcement. It gets them used to how law enforcement is, not just what they see on TV. Like Mr. McManus says, it goes a long way in how they respect law enforcement in society when they do graduate. They don't look upon law enforcement as this evil. So,
Do you know if there's any research that's been done with young people going into law enforcement because of a mentorship relationship with this school safety?
I don't know right offhand, but I know through Northwest Ed, they have a law enforcement or public safety kind of program built in there, and we've had some internships with them. And it gets those individuals interested. It gives them in front of a law enforcement officer to give them the education, to tell them what this job is gonna entail. And it provides an opportunity for them to come right along if they're interested and they're within that program. We have seen it before. I'm sure there's studies out there that have that, but that's a program that could be implemented. But that's just something we could look at.
Thank you.
Mr. Warner?
Yeah, I fully support the students building connections, a mentorship. That's all great. That's been proven study after study to be helpful for the students. I don't see where the need for an armed officer needs to play that role. It can be any qualified adult in their professional capacity and their background and their life experience. And what I'm hearing as far as benefits of having an armed officer play that role, the benefits are to police department at large, not just ours, but societally. The benefits aren't being spoken of as benefits for students unless it's career choice for the student. So that's where I'm still at with all of this is where's the benefit for the students and why an armed officer has to play that role. It could be social worker, all sorts of other well-qualified adults who provide that mentorship, provide those connections. Those are important. That's what's needed. But just because there's grant money and opportunity doesn't mean we should necessarily be chasing that grant money, in my opinion.
I think the benefit to the students and the staff is the day that unfortunate event happens. And you have a law enforcement officer there that's armed and that can confront that individual immediately or quicker than a response from law enforcement within the community.
That sounds good anecdotally, but are there any studies that you can point to that support that?
There's studies that have looked at inadvertent or adverting threats to schools. I understand that you gave a study to us, and I understand that. But there are other studies out there I can go through, and I can give you a list of studies that
I'd appreciate that.
say that SROs are a benefit. But they also indicate that they're just a part of the solution. They're not the whole solution. And looking at the PhD, the doctor that was in your study, he says the model's not working just having an armed security officer. They have to be a bigger part. It has to be a community effort. It has to be a system-wide effort. SRO is just one part of that. And for them to be armed, and when an armed assailant shows up at your school, I think that's a huge benefit to the students and the staff. Because, I don't know how many other people would confront that individual. And where's that going to end? I hope it never happens. I hope we never have to deal with it. But in our society, we have dealt with it, and it continues to happen.
Thank you for your comment. And I want to note that specifically the study that shared with us excluded any scenarios in which a resource officer prevented or deterred. So when you take out any scenario where the presence of such an officer served the purpose you're ending up with base data. The number of of fire engines or fire emergency go up as the construction at fire. That doesn't mean that the fire engine caused that. So I do want to point out that go back to the source data of the article that Commissioner Moore shared. It was very clearly any deferred attacks by. I also want to highlight what you discussed. That this is, in addition to being a very different, many of us, including our colleagues, were in school here, is your reference to diversion program, to convening those social workers. I have met Jennifer, the social worker in charge of this. This is where the funding is. People at work, people who are at risk, people who are facing challenges. We don't have a robust community. I don't want to say we don't have a robust community mental health. We don't nationally have robust mental health urgency. I know we're working on that at the county level, community. I do see the way that how funding is structured in reality and where we are, that this is an important convening apparatus to protect people at risk to kinds of resources to they're concerned with. I think that we're all concerned. So thank you for highlighting.
Comment?
Yes, I do appreciate, I'm not going to rehash all of my comments from the September 12th meeting, that at least in the presentation, you have made a distinct effort to show that this is a change policy. And like calling out DARE as something that you said might have looked nice from an adult's perspective, but the data didn't exist showing that it actually worked. And okay, I can remember my own time in DARE, and the most memorable parts was not don't do drugs. It was actually discussions about Stephen King novels that are frankly not appropriate for sixth graders. But so I do appreciate that. I appreciate that Jenny Lind is largely in plain clothes and presenting, for lack of a better term, a more approachable face. But it does make me wonder, as you make that officer less visibly and in the presentation less of a uniformed officer like yourself, how much of that is them as a member of the police department versus them as a specific adult with training to deal with a range of situations. And also in the study that was presented, it didn't, and I haven't been able to find studies because I'm not sure the comprehensive data exists on this, cases where situations were diffused without arms being brought into the discussion at all. If you have an unarmed officer that, say, knows certain hand-to-hand techniques that can contain a person without lethal force, then is that something that works? I don't know, because I haven't seen any data set that includes it. Like we do have, rather unfortunately, good data sets on mass shootings in schools because those happen to make the news. I also have concerns about, yes, this is a grant funding from the state of Michigan, but so it's not coming out, or at least largely not coming out of Traverse City's budget, but if it is essentially providing an additional role for an officer, if that can result in our existing police force being either spread thinner or creating one or more vacancies that then could be just additional staff positions that need to be filled. And if you're talking about a general picture of an officer that is trying to develop relationships with youth, particularly middle and high school students, in environments to make them more comfortable with dealing with law enforcement and to identify threats preemptively. Schools are but one location for that. And if it is a more community-centric approach rather than just school resource officer as traditionally defined, then I can see that extending to Lot V, Front Street and Pine, on Friday nights, where I'm glad there's no more drag racing down Front Street, but there is still a place for high school students to hang out with cars and engage in certain activities that could lead to criminality, or the mall, or the Midway during the Cherry Festival, as locations where young people gather, and it can be an instance where if law enforcement is trying to develop a relationship with the area's youth, those would be also places to have that presence and to develop those relationships.
We've heard from the majority of us. My colleague over here has been waiting patiently. You have a question?
I was, with a mother-in-law who is a former teacher, we have the principal of the high school here. The teaching world has changed dramatically post-COVID. And there was questions about benefits to the students. There was discussion about the benefits to the officers. But I would really like to hear what the adults in the building are looking for and what they would like to get out of this program. The other thing I would just note for the council or the commission, maybe this isn't popular, but I would really caution against hamstringing the public safety officials on what tools they have to their ability. There's also going to be requests, or there's going to be needs or desires that the school is going to have. I think we need, this moves forward, I would really strongly recommend we let the body, the police department and the schools work through what is the best mix of tools for filling this role. With that, I'd really like to hear from Principal Houghton.
I want to hear from the board members here also. What are your thoughts?
Sure. So I've been at the helm at Central for 7 years. This is my 7th year there. And it is...
Congratulations.
Thank you. It's a wonderful community. 1,400 students is what we serve in that one building, and about 100 plus employees is what come to work every day there to support the kids. So just so you guys can kind of think about the scope. And as amazing as our kids are, I call the police a lot for lots of different reasons. It could be as minor as when you have 500 teenage drivers. There are quite a few accidents that occur. We also live in a neighborhood, and sometimes my students feel like 25 miles an hour doesn't apply to them. And so we work really hard to be good neighbors and to be good stewards of our space, but sometimes that involves me calling these guys to help with some support and some reminders on both sides of it for our community and for our kids to keep everyone safe. When I think about this position for us and for myself as an educator, the connection and the relationship would be huge. The chief and I do have each other's cell phone numbers because we call each other throughout the year at a few different points when things arise. And he knows me and I know him very well. And that's been nice that he knows who to go to, but keep in mind every time we call non-emergency unless it's a 911, which we call quite often too at a high school this large. I get a different person, I get a different officer, I get somebody with a different face and a different feel, and so the first thing we have to assess as an administration team, okay, who do we have coming in? There were some regulars that we've had, which has been nice. What's their flow? How do they deal with kids? How do they greet kids? What's the emergency going on? And is it going to be this officer dealing with the first care, or is it going to be myself and my staff? Because ultimately, when I think about the benefit for kids, there is something about when I'm 15 or 16 and I've made a mistake or something's happened, could be really small, could be really huge. Seeing somebody who I know and who I know has shown up for me every day is huge, right? And having a relationship with the city police where I have a point person and I have that connection. They know us, they know our kids, they know how to treat kids, they know what we expect. They also know the talents of my team and how to kind of push and pull on our strengths too. It would be really valuable and would give us a stable connection. When we had an officer a few years ago, we saw him at football games. He kind of knew, hey, what's going on? Is there anything I need to keep an eye on? Or he'd talk to kids. That common connection it's just invaluable for us and how we respond to whether it's an emergency or whether it's something really minor. We're just quicker to respond when we all know each other and we all know the landscape. So that to me is a really huge appeal. And then them just understanding kids today and us kind of breaking that barrier of sometimes we see the police as always coming in as a negative thing, but they're really here to support our community and support our kids. And the more times we can have those interactions and have them be positive, I think is an investment in our future and an investment in these students' relationships with the police and what they're charged to do in our community. I think that's really important and huge. We work with probation officers. We have we have some students who are on probation. And so to have a school resource officer as well in the building who could help support some of those students on a regular basis and sort of know some of the resources through the court system that we just aren't aware of or how to make some of those connections for our kids would be really helpful for us as a school administrator as well.
Thank you. I really appreciate that.
I just had some questions. Who would the resource officer report to? I'm a simple person.
So depending on who, the school resource officer is employed by the City of Traverse City Police Department. Okay, they have a supervisor, chain of command, just like any other officer. Right?
Okay.
But they would have a lot of input and a lot of communication with the school staff as well. And when they're at the school, they're expected to make sure that they know that they're in the building, or if they're leaving, that, hey, this is where I'm going, or this is what I'm going to do. I'm going over to Eastern Elementary for a little bit to deal with a situation, or just talk to the students, or have, so that when Ms. Houghton calls upon them, she knows, hey, he's not in the building right now, he's over here. But officially, they're employed by the Traverse City Police Department.
Okay. I appreciate the clarity of your comments. I really do. Mainly in the high school, correct? Entirely in the high school, correct?
Yeah.
And then the second thing that I think we haven't talked about, I would think parents might like having a police officer that had a cooperative kind of relationship within the school, being there on site. I think that might be an extra layer of reassurance for some folks. Just a consideration.
And just the relationship with the students, it's just as important, the relationship you have with the parents too. Because dealing with student-age individuals, we have policies and procedures and laws that require us to make contact with the parents. And there's conversations that we would have with them as well, as far as what's happening, what can we do to help better this situation, or just having the conversation at a football game, just, hey, I'm the school resource officer. If you need anything, here's my card, and you give me a call. And the more relationships, the bigger the trust we have, the more eyes and ears we have out there to prevent something that could be tragic down the road. And just having that familiarity and that consistency with an officer is, I can't speak for the benefits enough.
Frankly, sometimes the parents are the issue. So sometimes what I'm familiar with is when the teachers can't get any further with the parents on the child's performance at school or whatever, sometimes they will bring in the SRO to help be a part of that conversation on behavior change that they need to see at home to support that student success. So that's one of the things that I've
We've used them too for like well child checks too. Like, hey, we're concerned
Yeah,
about, that
that
sometimes
makes
happens out of
sense.
hours, right? We'll see something, whether it's on social media or something will get reported to us, and we connect with these guys right away, and we say, I need you to send someone out to the house. We can't get a hold of mom or dad. We're concerned about, this student and where they're at. And those guys respond right away. But again, it's a different person every time, so it makes it a little bit tricky for me. I care a ton about my kids, so I'm like, okay, I'm trusting, like, did they go out there and provide the care that I know that these two gentlemen would provide, and their staff has been amazing, but having some consistency with that connection would just be great for us.
All right.
For the
Okay.
moment.
All right, and I want to recognize Trustee Byrd is here as well. She and I are both parents, so I think we can speak to being parents as well as trustees. I'm Josie Ballinger. I'm a member of the Board of Education for TCAPS, and I actually want to bring in some comments that I got from the vice president of our board, Trustee Flanoy Humphreys. Some of you might know her as the former music director of West Middle School, and she's currently been serving on our board as the vice president. She's got 33 years of teaching experience in Texas, Arkansas, and Michigan, including 19 years at TCAPS. And of the 4 different school districts that she worked in, 3 had SROs who were highly effective and professional, in her opinion. They always had a good rapport with students and staff. She said sometimes they were in uniform, sometimes they were in plain clothes. She thought that that was great for showing the kids that they were regular people. At West Middle School, the SRO interacted with students early in the morning, at lunch, and after school, and oftentimes he was the first to respond to situations, for example, breaking up student fights. Her bottom lines are that SROs can build trust between our students and police. They build great relationships with some of the most marginalized students. They're present in both good times and challenging times, providing consistency. And they provide stability and security to kids, which are 2 emotions that they need. So with that, I will pivot to my own perspective as a parent. And I want to put into context everything that TCAPS has done in the last year to put security and mental health on the front burner. Among other things, TCAPS has done this last year. We've hired a security expert to assess the physical infrastructure of our buildings. We've enhanced all of our doors in all of our buildings and taken other safety measures like securing windows. We hired a district-wide safety and security coordinator who's here, Patrick McManus. We have advertised for more social workers, and there is definitely, admittedly, a difficulty attracting them to our area. That's another conversation for another day, the cost of living. And we are in the process of building a physical and mental health facility at West Middle School that will serve the entire district. Both Central High School and West Senior High have also established peer-to-peer counseling programs through the University of Michigan. And this board is also looking at revising our cell phone policy this next month with eye toward improving mental health and social connections. But to me, one missing piece here is the SRO, or SROs, I should say, ideally in all of our buildings, but starting with the ones that are at highest risk, our high schools, and then working down to our middle schools and hopefully eventually our elementary schools. So as a parent, I would definitely have a better peace of mind knowing that we have SROs in our schools. Without them, I do feel our students and our staff are that much more vulnerable. And not a day goes by when I put my kid on a bus or say goodbye to them in the morning that I don't think about what used to be unthinkable. It has become normal for my age, my generation. Ever since my oldest child went to kindergarten 6 months post the Sandy Hook massacre. So as a parent and as a TCAPS trustee, I do want to do everything possible. I want to take advantage of every tool that is available to us, and SROs are one of those tools. So, among the benefits you've heard, the first to respond to an emergency or incident, They can diffuse situations that otherwise might escalate and go to the PD to be handled as a crime. They can serve as a deterrent to students engaging in harmful or criminal conduct. They have a consistent on-site presence to coach our staff and our students on emergency procedures and during lockdown drills. They can answer teachers, administrators, and students' questions on an ongoing basis. They serve as a role model for our students, building positive relationships. They normalize law enforcement in their eyes. And they're able to monitor our bathrooms and our hallways, even on an ad hoc basis, reducing the burden on the teachers and administrators. We do still have vaping in our bathrooms. I hear about it as a board trustee. It is still a problem. Excessive time or cell phone use in bathrooms, that as well. And I would say reporting physical or sexual abuse to the Traverse Bay Children's Advocacy Center or County Prosecutor's Office. That's another role that they fulfill. But lastly, I just want to say, people might view SROs only in terms of the safety and security. To me, it is interconnected with mental health and student achievement. We haven't talked about student achievement here, but if you improve connections with kids and their mental health, they are also going to perform better in the classroom. And at the end of the day, that's who we are as TCAPS. That's our mission, to educate. And we do want to improve student achievement. So that is another extension of an SRO. Thank you.
Bert, you have any final comments on your?
I'll email, I've got a few questions I want to follow up at, but nothing, I don't think earth shattering, that'll change your guys' discussion, so, thank you.
Ms. Burt.
Okay, thank you. So as a member of the TCAPS trustee board, as well as a community member and a parent, I have some other views for consideration as well. And first of all, I do want to say that I am in support of an SRO in our school system for a lot of the reasons that Ms. Ballinger just brought forward. But I do see some problematic things that we need to work through. And so one of the first things that I can address, and this was something that was brought up by Mr. Werner, is the idea of having an armed officer in schools and you know, the pros and cons of that. On one hand, yes, it seems like something we don't need. It can be intimidating to some children. On the other hand, I do believe that, you know, if anyone was to approach the school with a rifle or a gun of their own, or any kind of weapon, you know, you can't do hand-to-hand combat with somebody with a weapon. It's just not feasible, and I'm not going to try to tell the law enforcement how they should do that, because I think they are the experts in that. The second part of that is I do feel with certain things that happen with kids, and I do want to qualify, I actually have some experience with this. I've been working with school police officers since 1997, when I first started working as a hearing officer for Chicago Public Schools and their Board of Education. And so I did get to see what worked and what didn't. I do love the idea of the plainclothes officer. I think that's more welcoming. I do love the idea of the specialized training, something a little bit different than the normal law enforcement tough exterior, if you will. I do like the idea of learning dispute resolution, restorative techniques over some of the conventional techniques that might be used out in the street versus, because we're dealing with students, we're dealing with children. One of the benefits to having a trained SRO, in my mind, aside from having dispute resolution, aside from being able to appropriately respond to criminal offenses or risks to the student population or the staff population, are their investigatory training procedures. I think that that's superior to what we have in school right now. They're trained to do that. And so when we have offenses that reach that level, it's appropriate that they should be conducting those investigations. That also brings a lot of those investigations to a level which people can have some access to if they have questions about it. depending on, you know, the age of the child. So I think that there's a lot of benefits to that. Some of the cons for me, and it's not, it's less a con than it is a recognition, is that for BIPOC people here in northern Michigan, we have a history of trauma with law enforcement. And that starts with a history of trauma within the school system as well. It's only, you know, the last boarding school was closed 25, 30 years ago. It's not that, we were all alive, I think, during that time. And so my people, Native American community, other BIPOC members of the community look at school resource officers and school police as someone who's out to get them. Because they have, in fact, been used to take away parents, they've been used to take away children, they've been used in a lot of different ways historically that were traumatic for the families. And we're all dealing with that dysfunction now. So a lot of the dysfunction we see in our families is because of the breakup of the family that was inspired by a lot of these systems. So that's the first thing to understand and recognize. So when we're dealing with our populations, I think it's really important to get specialized training to understand that and how to navigate that successfully so that we can learn to work together. I'm not going to necessarily say trust at this point because obviously we know that trust is one of those things that has to be generated over time and with experience. But I think that that's one thing for deep consideration here is that I know for the people in our communities and any person of color who's hearing about the school resource officer is they're feeling fearful of that right at the get-go. And so I just want to make sure that as we're having these discussions and as we're moving forward with these ideas, and I appreciate the information from Captain Richmond. I've known Captain O'Brien for quite a while, and so you know, I know what his approach is to this, and I trust that. Captain Richmond, I don't know you as well, but I'm assuming that he wouldn't have gotten you here to this point without training you well. So I'm hoping that those discussions continue about what that is and what it looks like with input from our relevant communities. Thank you.
Coming up an hour here, we do have another item.
I do have one item just procedurally that we have to do, so you know.
Just for my own better understanding, were any students invited to participate in this meeting?
Excuse me?
Were any students invited to participate in this meeting?
I invited a couple, but
Okay, I mean, some of them are young adults. They're 18 years old, and they can speak for themselves and not, like, yes, we're adults and we like to speak for them. They can speak for themselves on many occasions.
Mayor, I have
second,
spoken to them.
sorry,
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Just follow up, I appreciate Commissioner Stanley's comments about the source data, but what's stated in there is an inability to measure deterred shootings or non-events, which is the case because, like, if a plane doesn't crash, we don't keep statistics on the plane didn't crash. And so if there was deterrence, if the troubled individual didn't report themselves, they never know something was deterred.
Okay, what's the next steps?
So right now, I need our board to approve the minutes of our last, just procedural for Open Meetings Act purposes, so if we could do that quickly.
Yep. So my fellow trustees, are there any changes to the draft meeting minutes from the committee meeting on June 1st?
No.
Okay. All right, then hearing no changes, minutes will remain as posted. And I will just announce that the next Board Executive Committee meeting for the Traverse City Area Public Schools is this Thursday, June 29th at 9 a.m. at the Tompkins Boardman Administration Building, 412 Webster Street, Traverse City. Thank you.
First of all, is this a request that's going to come to the city commission from the Board of Education, or is this coming from the committee?
So at this point, it would come from the committee. I mean, really, it's from me. I have the authority to make the request.
Okay.
So, you know, I've made that request from that standpoint, meeting with the city, interim city manager as well as the chief. And so purposes, our grant, we do have to have the position filled relatively soon, the beginning of August, for the funding. We have the funding approved, we have the grant awarded. It's just a matter of being able to do that. So if we can't fulfill it by then, we have to try and do it reasonably with it soon. I have to notify the state of Michigan, before that date, if that is the case. So we are at a point to have to move rather.
You are now making you have made a formal request of the city to move forward with an SRO.
That is correct.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, we are ready to make a recommendation and bring that to the city commission for regular business meeting and possible action. We felt just with some of the history and the way this request is coming, that a study session would be a good way to start off that conversation before we bring it to a regular meeting.
Okay.
And
We
would
have
that be
a special
spent?
meeting on the 10th, or our next regular meeting will be the 17th. So see what happens. Either one. Yes,
We'll be
sir.
in touch.
I was just going to ask what you just said. Thanks.
Okay. Personally, I'd rather do these things at regular meetings, not special. Unless it's a do or die, if we don't do it now.
I think you'll be okay with your regular dates.
Thank you.
And we do have to close our meeting out, so if we're at that
I will
point.
let you do that because we'll have to stop, and some of these people may want to go get lunch.
There you go. Okay, we'll go ahead and close it out.
Okay,
And take some lunch with you if you like.
all right.
Thank you.
I hereby declare this committee meeting closed, adjourned.
All right, next we're going to have a discussion as relates to the senior center. Chairs are going to be opened up here. I prefer to have this as a roundtable discussion, so those of you that want to sit around at the table, fine. These people standing up here behind the podium all day where I can't see them. But I understand you got to do this for the computer, so others can come up and sit around.
Sorry for getting my names confused. You haven't met us, I'm sorry.
So I'm not blocking the screen. I'm moving so I'm not blocking the screen. Not that I want to get away from you. Well, good to know your feelings mutual.
Diving deep into that one.
It takes it a minute.
I'm down 41 pounds as of morning, so. Well, there you go. Well, there you go. You can gain one back. You're trying to lose it? Okay.
I don't know.
There you go. There you go. That's possible. I hear you.
Power for the
Yes.
Be on the water. All right.
Yeah, I think so. I'm gonna make a quick phone.
I don't remember the secret which she did. They came out here.
Who did the secret?
It was county.
Oh, okay.
Right. Can you grab
The screen turn on. Take the screen and
I don't know. Did this vacate? Am I good here?
I have no idea. The whole thing is surprising to me. I thought we were meeting tonight, as did the paper.
Oh, really? You know, I actually don't on the city website.
How you been? Okay. My gig at Elk Rapids ended last season. Congratulations. They approved his contract, I made him get sworn in immediately. I didn't want anybody back. No, not that, but I've been back for about 4 hours since, so, you know.
Or, yeah, it started. I think the parade kind of got canceled halfway through
Because of rain?
because it rained 4.7 inches in the span
Come on,
of.
what's the little rain on parade?
You had people. But like there were.
I'm gonna sit on the end.
Me and my sister were both kids in different grades. I was going to start when my sister was near the end. And like after I finished, my mom went back to the start and skiing. My sister had it on yet, so she told me. Okay, we're going home. This is good. Which my sister liked.
Well, this is the same
This
stuff they
and
have.
I'm waiting for it.
You just want to show the 3D.
Just lucky I didn't have more serious injury. I was cruising 40 miles an hour and dropped.
Hi, Tim. How are you? How much rain, do you have a rain gauge at your house?
100 feet.
Do you have a rain gauge at your house? I didn't set mine up yet this year, but I heard.
Came down pretty hard.
I asked Ross, he said he got an inch and a quarter at his house. But Kevin lives on the east side of town, he got 3 inches at his place.
It's the same, so.
We had a couple
Some of it I
manholes.
saw came southwest to northeast, so that would make sense. The east side got more.
We had a couple of manholes blow right off. Right
Well,
down.
so, you know, the bone
Months
didn't heal for.
Garfield, right before Garfield,
Muscles
this
got
months
attached to that, so I'm
it
just.
just blew right off.
I'm gonna take my 2D.
And I saw the,
On Garfield?
on Garfield,
By the Civic Center Drive? Or?
just north of, between there and in front, right where it's got, yeah, right on that slope right there.
It was the first time I was able to get 3,000 steps.
It's okay, that's okay.
And I saw the email with the video of the folks by East Bay Park with everything come out of there. So we're gonna set up a little,
I've seen you on
we'll
T&V
sit down and chat about that.
with him in your kitchen, I think.
In my kitchen, that would be correct.
I sent her a response.
Should we scoot over and you can join us, or?
Yeah, Mitch would do better.
Yeah.
Some of us have to leave here in about 45 minutes. So we'll take it from there, or at least one other person I know has to leave here 45 minutes, me too. So we're going to be done at 1:30, whether we like it or not. So,
All right, well, the design for the senior center is at a point where we wanted to get in front of the commission before we end up bringing potential bids and what have you to the full board. We're at 50% design, past 50% design. We have more confident construction estimates, thank you. And what we thought we would do is kind of walk through where the design process has been up to this point and what's going to be happening next steps. And also, I know, in speaking with the mayor, once we had more concrete estimates, start having some preliminary discussion on what are the strategies we can utilize to fill potential gaps. So with that, if there's, the commission is comfortable with it, I'd like to turn over to Tim, and then we'll have Ray just kind of walk through how we got here, unless Tim or Michelle's going to do that. But
I was just going to, Ray, we teed it up for Ray to have the conversation about, where we are. We just reported out. We've had some listening sessions with the seniors, and Ray's, has all that information, so I just would turn it over to Ray to give where we're at and what are the next steps.
Great, thank you for having me, and question fill you in rapidly. So we completed 50% drawings in June. We are going to be releasing drawings for July 17th, when the drawings will go out for bids. There's going to be a 3-week bidding period, which we will not extend. We're going to keep that a firm 3 weeks. That would have us having the bids due on the 4th of August. So once we have the bids, we will have our real number, which is going to be very exciting. And then the hope is that potentially on the 21st of August, we could then be talking about approving contracts and so forth and start construction in September is what the goal is. And that's kind of what we had published early on. So we've been able to stay on track with everything from the PUD process through the current process of actually getting bids or drawings out for bidding and actually conducting the bid process. So it's all very exciting. A couple weeks back, we had more focused sessions, input sessions with the seniors. What we didn't want to do is, the previous meeting we had was like a 150-person meeting at the senior center, and that tends to be one of those situations where a few people are very vocal and get to speak. So we requested that we have smaller sessions. So we had 2 days, we had 3 sessions per day, and they were much smaller. We would have hoped there was a little bit more input or participation in that, but it was still very good for what we had. But what it really allowed us to do is let everybody at those sessions contribute and voice their opinion. So that was very successful. As part of that process, we took input on what the color schemes might be for the interiors. And then Michelle Crum did an additional couple days at the senior center where they actually took voting on the color schemes. And interestingly enough, they came in exactly 37 to 37. So that was kind of funny because we were like, okay, we're going to have a sure winner, and that didn't happen. But it was good. The questions and comments that we got helped kind of guide us and make a final decision on where we're headed with things. I think the folks were very excited about the fact that things are happening because there was a lot of discussion as to what's really going on. So that was nice to be able to get all that information out on the table to everybody. So as far as the budget goes, we did update the budget with our 50% drawings. The budget didn't change substantially. There was a little bit of a swing from where we were, but it was not like a 20% or larger type thing that we weren't sure what we were going to see. Because as we get more information on the documents, we're able to do a little bit more detailed estimate or feel better about our estimates. But I will say in this day and age, it's not like it used to be. We used to be very confident with our estimates, and there's so much volatility in the market. It's just very hard for us to be very confident if we actually get bids in. But we do feel like the numbers that we put out there are conservative, and we feel like we're going to be covered with those, which is great. From the perspective of where we are with the project, the fundraising or filling shortfalls is not in our scope of work, so I would leave that to others. But I would just say, from the perspective we're looking at it, is that we're going to get a $10 million building for closer to $3 million out of pocket for the city, which I think is very encouraging, and that's something that I would hope that we don't lose sight about, because something needs to be done with that building. No matter what happens, there's going to be money spent. So the fact that we're going to be able to spend a lesser amount of money and get a bigger building is an excellent situation. So we're excited about that. So.
And if I could speak just to the money part. So we did receive the funding agreement from MEDC for the $7 million. The completion date, and the reason why we're trying to maintain the schedule, is that the completion date will be December of '24. So we want to keep that in mind as we move forward, because that is a real date. And if we're trying to build a building, generally, 12 to 16 months is not unreasonable. and we need to be able to have a completion by December of 2020. So that's an important date to keep.
Substantial completion, not completion?
It is the funding agreement requires us to be complete, is what the terms say. So
And that's typically substantial completion, though, is what I've seen in other.
So to help keep the budget in check, have built in some alternates into this
Okay.
bid document to just to give us
So
some options.
your $10,600,000 includes all the alternates, right? That's the bottom line.
The $10,600,000.
Okay, so if I take out the alternates, which also includes not having the roof, not having the metal roof, instead having the asphalt shingles, just to build the building without the alternates in there is $9,178,835. That's my math. Now you
Sounds reasonably correct,
Okay.
yes. I don't-
So it means if we have $8,100,000 in the bank ready to go, then we need to come up with another $1,078,835 to build the building. Now, there's probably other things on the outside that we can back off on, such as maybe not as much of a parking lot, maybe some of the sidewalks don't go in. There's other things that could possibly come in there. My focus is you got to get a building built. Everything else is secondary in my mind.
So that, if I could, Richard, that estimate does include $1.2 million for site work, which would be your parking lot and other site-related features, including your stormwater.
That's included in the $10.8 million.
That's included in the lower number that you quoted as well.
Right.
But that does not include Barlow Street. Barlow Street would be coming from a separate budget, and that was one of the things that we had listed in there of, Barlow Street site work had an add of 0 because we don't have that number, but that will be bid separately. And what we've talked about with city engineering as to how we're going to bid this is we're going to take separate bids for the site work package so that we're able to understand what the cost of Barlow Street will be, and then the building will be a separate package. We're going to have that bid opening the same day, same time, but essentially we'll have all those numbers on the table. So we'll have a site work cost, a building cost, and a Barlow Street site work cost as part of what we do on our bid opening day of August.
Yeah. But I know that some of the things you have in here, especially around the parking lots and all that, you got to deal so we can deal with other regulations that we have. But like some of the sidewalks that we have in there going like toward the lake, those sidewalks could be put in later, as long as you have them in the design. Some other stuff, there's other things that we could cut if we have to. Correct? I'm talking around the site work.
Correct. And as we're developing the drawings, we're looking for potential what we call value engineering opportunities.
Okay.
So that if things come in higher and we have to scramble, which is not unusual in our line of work to have to be prepared to offer additional value engineering ideas, we've been thinking about things as we're working through the process.
Okay.
But the alternates that you've mentioned gives us a very clear way to do that at bid time, to say we can quantify the cover drop-off, we can quantify the geothermal, so we'll have numbers. The one thing that we have also in there as an alternate is green roof and pervious pavers, because we have lot coverage that we have to comply with for this site. So we're balancing between, do we want to do green roof or pervious pavers, because there's maintenance issues with pervious pavers, there's benefits with green roofs, so that's some of these things after the post bid and after we open up bids, we'll be able to evaluate things in more detail to say our recommendation is X, Y, or Z as related to certain items.
Now, in some of your bid documents, while you have concrete things, you have other things like the equipment that would go into the kitchen. That's an allowance?
No, it's just an additional item. So the cost of the kitchen equipment, so what we talked about is that the base kitchen that we're going to get in this building will be a catering kitchen that would be similar to what's at the Barnes as a reference point, because that's just a simple 3-compartment sink, hand wash sink, and some space to be able to bring in catering. Most restaurants and caterers want a catering kitchen. They do not cook their food on site for most venues that you have. So upgrading to a commercial kitchen will be an extra item that is about $175,000 cost from a local vendor who helped us to specify equipment that was all electric, because there was a decision made to follow suit to make this a completely electrified building. So whether we are doing geothermal or not, we are not planning on having a gas line running to this building. We're going to do all electric, and that included the kitchen area as well. So the building's designed for that. And that would fit with the Light and Power's 2030, push to have complete renewable energy as their source of electricity.
Okay.
And that was at a meeting with the Green Team, if I can interject that, sorry.
Right, so and then at the discussion that we had, that Light and Power participated in, there's also opportunity for energy rebates or energy-related rebates, which we're working with the Light and Power team and other community members about maybe looking for opportunities for securing rebates or funding through different programs for the facility.
But it would be prudent, in my opinion, to not put those on the table. We did talk to Jacob, and we're working with him at Light and Power, but if we can still assume that we're raising X amount of dollars, and then that way.
Well, yeah, I mean, if that comes about, great.
Right.
But, yeah, all opportunities, because some of these add-ons aren't really going to be done until the very end, so, that we have here.
Why are you
Those are
using
decisions
pervious?
you'll have to make up, so.
Why are you using pervious?
Excuse me, I haven't recognized you at this point. This is at the city commission level. Rick, I'll get to you in a few moments, okay? If you would, please. Okay. Any other commission thoughts? Yes, sir.
Two questions. It was mentioned as far as Barlow being bid out separately. Is the right-of-way line is it a fine line on this project? Because the parking lot is designed, it appears, to extend beyond the right-of-way, so is it used as the exact line, or some is part of the project and some is part of Barlow?
One of the things that we're looking at is the line as to where the stormwater management system comes into play, because it would make sense to share a stormwater management system. So, yes, and we're looking at
So it depends.
something that makes sense. We do have resources for the Barlow side of it that are different than the senior center side of it. So we have street reconstruction dollars. We need to manage that and come up with a proposal for you to understand where we're going with it, and look to see where we can leverage other funding for getting the project funded 100%. So.
And then second, somewhat related question is, with this new parking lot and the layout, can you point to where you hope to store snow?
The snow storage would be, and I could get more definitive, but the snow storage would be, there's a clear spot right now that currently is occupied by parking that's going to be removed, so that lawn was going to be replaced with a lawn as opposed to parking. I think that would be a good opportunity as well on the
Southwest quadrant?
I'm sorry, the northwest quadrant, where that parking is. There's currently some retention basins and things that might get filled in, because the currently you have retention basins out there. Today, we do a lot of underground storage below parking lots and such, and I think that that's what the plan is going to be, underground storage, so that there's going to be some areas there that are available for pushing snow. And then some of it will be potentially off-site, but there is a little bit on-site. We don't have a huge area that we've articulated right now as being snow storage, but I think that those are the opportunities that we would look at.
Could you elaborate on your concern for that, so we can?
Just, you've thought about it, because too often in the private sector, I feel like they don't think it through. Like, oh, we're building this for the summer. Like, great for summer. But what are you doing for snow storage? And it is an ongoing expense if we have to haul it off-site. It's small, but every year.
And I think that that's where the pervious surface or pervious paver conversation came in with Frank and with Tim, is that they're a little bit more concerned about maintenance of pervious pavers as opposed to, making up our pervious condition or having that pervious situation met by green roof. And the other thing with green roof is that it also protects your membrane roofs when you have it. So there's a lot of benefits. My gut feeling is that we're going to try to max out the green roof and minimize the pervious pavers, but I think we're going to have some pervious pavers. So what the thought was is to use that for traffic calming, like we have those circles where people would cross the road and everything. So we'd like to be intentional about where we have those pervious pavers so that they can be traffic calming
Yeah,
elements.
my question was mostly just to Tim's point that
Sure. It's been thought
the
about.
team has put some good thought into snow.
And we will convey that again just to make sure.
Thank you.
Also, as part of your Barlow Street work, it's also the far northern end of Barlow. Part of that instruction is to take all of that out and put it back into grass.
Correct.
Is that part of it too?
Correct.
So I mean, so it's not just the hard surface, but it's taking out some hard surface and closing that, so it's now no longer open for traffic, so.
And MDOT is planning to put a water treatment unit, water quality unit in the right-of-way, and we're trying to take advantage of that if we can, which would maybe help minimize the work that we have to do for the site and for the Barlow Street end. So we're working on that, and it's in a location that may be to our advantage to be able to utilize, so we're working on that as well, try to figure out how we can take advantage of that.
Okay. Anything else?
I'm just wondering, you mentioned about sidewalks or parking lot being partially done, but then other elements can be done at a later point. How practical is that in a bid perspective? Like, I can see that there's essentially two different portions of the parking lot, and theoretically you could build the parking lot closer to the building and then later on expand it beyond that, but I don't know from...
Most of that, when you get a bid back, it's going to be in quantities.
Yeah.
And so there'll be a takeoff. No?
So these will be,
this is not being bid as-
these will be lump sum. So
It's architectural.
So what we would do in the process is that, so we will get a lump sum price for the building, a lump sum price for the site work, and a lump sum price for the Barlow work. And then during post-bid interviews, we would interview the candidates that we would like to have more information from, and we would start to peel into the discussion some of these other options. We do have the trail project, which I believe was, you guys reviewed, the city commission reviewed a short time ago, that would overlap this project. So there's opportunities to look at carrying out some of that work into that other project. Should know by that time as to whether or not we're successful with that grant. So then it just comes down to figuring out on a basis that we need to, based on the number. If the number comes in favorable, then there's no work to be done.
Yeah.
If the numbers don't come in within the funds that have been allocated, or the funds that we can identify, which I'm fairly comfortable that that the numbers are reasonable for planning purposes and where we're at, and we're hoping that we get competitive numbers, especially on the site work. That can be a game changer. So until we get the actual numbers, I'm thinking a bunch of different ways we can move forward, and this is also an appeal to those that want to make investments, and now's the time that we identify those resources that are outside of the normal funding and figure out what that is.
But I think he answered my question. After they get the numbers, there'll be some value engineering done to say, okay, and I'm just looking at the one part where the sidewalk down there closer to the beach. Can some of that be eliminated or not? I think that stuff up on the top, on the southern side, may not be as easy to do, but that's the value engineering that they'll have to go back and bring back to us. It's all done in quantities. So, okay, instead of needing 100 cubic yards, we only need 80.
It's not done in quantities.
Well, however you figure
But the
it
bottom
out.
line is, at this point, the parking lots are not being piecemealed. It's all in there. If we had to go back, yes, then we would look at specifics like sidewalks, parking lots, whatever it might be, and then address that as a value engineering proposition. As Tim said, our hope is that we don't have to value engineer. The hope is that we get our numbers, everything's in line, we feel comfortable that the funding's in line, we award a contract, we start construction. That's the perfect world. So-
Perfect world.
If I could just jump in here for a minute. I think the main takeaway here is, yes, I think there's an opportunity for the Friends of the Senior Center to do some fundraising, especially for a couple of those amenities that they probably really want, like the overhang, drop-off area, the courts, the kitchens. There's opportunities in there. I don't think we want to limit their, well, that we want to cap what we want, like them to try to fundraise. I think there's an opportunity here. And I think the thing we have to remember too, the senior center services beyond just the city of Traverse City. So when they're out there soliciting, making sure that we're looking at outside of just the city proper. I think the other thing to remember too, which I don't think there's any question that I'm aware of that this doesn't move forward, but this project is never going to get any cheaper than right now. It's just going to constantly get more expensive the longer and longer that it waits. There are some resources still in our ARPA dollars we could look at and other means. But as a community asset like this, I think having some community participation would be a good way to finish this project up.
Well, and I don't disagree, but if we don't get a building built, everything else becomes, I've always said the building's got to get built. And everything else, if you don't have the building, you don't need a parking lot. So all that's got to play together for it. We've got to get a building built. The other one is not going to go much longer.
Pam, you mentioned the stormwater and MDOT. Is that just for the US 31, or are they doing any processing of or would that handle any processing of stormwater coming from city streets, say Barlow itself, to the south of 31?
Yes, so that's being constructed on a city storm sewer, and so there's a contributing flow from the MDOT corridor, or there's contributing flows from other local streets. And one of the tasks that we're working on is determining what that percentage of share would be for the operation and maintenance in the future. So we're hopeful to bring forward an agreement essentially at some point in time for all of the connections to all the city storm sewers, for which hopefully we would have an agreement, a mutual agreement with MDOT about how we're operating, which we currently do not have an agreement.
Good. Commissioners, got anybody else from the commission? Yes, sir.
Sorry,
I can barely see you, Dan.
yeah,
Dan, you're going to have to, good long arm. Appreciate that.
There are 8 handicap spots, like, was that discussed? I mean, it might meet standards and whatnot, but it is a senior center, like, conversations with folks there.
Yeah, Michelle, with the county operation folks, talked about
Human flow, whatnot, and then kind of follow up to that. Human flow, logistics, I assume direct access to a sidewalk is required because that's what's shown. That there'll be a lot of seniors, not handicapped, but maybe a little bit slower. Would it be of any benefit to, I don't know, that north sidewalk that kind of wiggles out to Barlow, keep that more linear so that if additional handicap spots are needed in the future, like if we say, a few years from now, you just pop in those connections to turn them into making sure that, again, the great conversations have already been had. I don't want to participate.
But we had these conversations at the PUD level too, when we were going through the planning commission and going through our PUD process. A lot of discussion was had there. We at one point even had a walkway up the middle, which was we decided to get rid of that walkway because the reality is, when you think about the parking lots that we all traverse, you tend not to walk to the front of your vehicle to go to a sidewalk. You tend to walk behind your vehicle. So we have looked at all those things. I think there's great opportunity for trails, or to let those walks evolve, because I think part of what they're trying to do with what we are showing there is that if TART does get a trail across the front of the NMC side of things, that was trying to make those linkages. We are in touch with the folks that are doing the TART trail work. So all these connections, there's a lot of things in the air between MDOT connections, TART connections, but we are trying to make all those connections, and we will continue to do that through the process of construction.
Okay, thank you.
All right.
Plus, 70 is the new 60. Real happy to see bike racks there.
And I will say the thing that's really neat about what how Michelle Crum and how they're looking at things is they don't want this to be a space with a bunch of TVs where people go sit around and watch TV. They're truly calling this an active senior center, and I think that's important, that, you know, that's been a large part of the discussion, is that they really are promoting folks to get out, do things, and participate. And, you know, there's a lot of different spaces within the building, outside the building. We've had really good conversations with the pickleball court contingents and the tennis folks, and, you know, if you get a chance to go out there and see what's going on, there's a lot of people active on that site, which is very exciting. So,
I hope it says pickleball somewhere on the site map, right?
No, cucumber ball.
I hate the name pickleball, but that says proposed tennis courts.
Well,
When
what we
people look
decided-
at this map, they understand that that's also the pickleball courts, right?
And just in the last week, we actually had conversations with city and senior center staff. So what was decided is that we're going to have 4 pickleball courts that are what we call primarily pickleball courts. So they'll be striped and colored for pickleball, with tennis being secondary. And then there'll be 1 court that is tennis primary with 4 outlined pickleball courts. So we'll end up having, we were going to go to 6 because there was some concern from some of the seniors during our input sessions, but I think that we kind of pulled it back in and decided we're going to stay with the 8 that we always have had, but we wanted to do 4 predominantly pickleball, 1, you know, so I think it's a very nice compromise, and everybody's on board with that, so.
Any other questions? All right, we have a couple of guests here with us, so Rick, you had some comments, I hope you remembered them. Okay, so, go ahead.
Primarily, I'm here because I'm angry about cutting down 30 trees, of which 26 are, but I'd tell in perfect shape. And when you had the PUD meeting at the Planning Commission, I protested that, and much you can in 3 minutes. And the vice chair didn't respond to the questions or ask the architect to identify the trees to the Planning Commission and give an excuse of why they're going to get cut down, because none of it seems to have anything to do with the tennis courts or the building construction. So she said, well, he seems to be over there busily writing notes, so rest assured he'll take care of it. So here's the map that was available for that meeting, 30 trees coming down, not to mention the lilac bushes that are a major sound buffer to the beachgoers. And there's nothing in the packet today to explain what it is or isn't going to do with the trees. In addition to that, you just had that presentation by the Tart Trails to expand the trail, and they mentioned just between Murchie Bridge and the east side of Senior Center Park, they're recommending taking down 18 trees. So if you remember a few years ago, you had a standing room only crowd at the library in the McGuire room of people interested in saving and preserving trees in the city, overflowing crowd. So here we are without any really public notice of what's going to affect the park goers. Yeah, remember, this has been a park for 90 years. The city, I have newspaper clippings where the city used to advertise in the Record Eagle this park, and people would come up and play shuffleboard from downstate. So when you have these, quote, public meetings, they're overflowed with county residents who have no say whatsoever in the city parks. So all I'm asking is, from the front of this building to the beach, that grassy area, just leave it alone. There's a step wall put in there, and I don't even know where that came from. I mean, that's where people who don't have a lot of money have weddings, right where you put that step wall. That's where they put up the tents and the chairs. I mean, just leave it alone. There's hundreds of people that go to the Senior Center Park property every day in this May through October, and they don't play tennis, they don't play shuffleboard, they don't go to the building, they go to use that area between the sand and the building. I mean, most of them come from Boardman neighborhood. And since I was driven off a volleyball beach, that's been where I go. And what's different, you're going to take down, on the west side of the property next to Barlow, you're going to take down the lilac bushes, and they are a visual and a sound buffer. Otherwise, all you're going to hear is...
Mr. Buckhalter, thank you. Your time for comment has elapsed. We'll move to the next speaker. There is one.
Sure. Thank you.
You're here.
I came hoping to hear more.
Would you, ma'am, just identify
Oh,
yourself?
I'm
if you
sorry.
would? Thank
Jackie
you.
Anderson, Comanche Street, Traverse City, Michigan. I came hoping to hear more about the group's expectations for private fundraising to supplement and fill in some of this budgetary gap. And I haven't heard any comments about that yet. I hope I will. And just to mention a comparable experience, I was on the board for Friends of Easling Pool, which within the last few years raised funds to renovate that public asset. And I know what it took, both in time and manpower, to raise $750,000 over a period of about 1.5 years. So any expectations for rapid private fundraising to fill the gap, I would be cautious with.
Nope. All I'm telling you is that what they told me 8 months ago. Tell them what we need. They've been notified what we need. I'll leave it up to the Friends of the Senior Center to do what they need to do.
So
With Mr. Carruthers leading the charge.
So you've spoken with them since
They have
these
known
numbers
about-
were
They have
updated?
known the direction we were going, that we were going to have add-ons and things like that. We designed and bid the whole thing, but the add-ons, I know that Mr. Carruthers has known about it. I've been in meetings with him about it,
And
as well as the Stedmans, so.
The timing of that last conversation was before these numbers or after?
They attended the input sessions.
Yeah.
The Stedmans and Mr. Carruthers were both part of those input
Yeah.
sessions that we had a couple weeks ago when the numbers were released. So everybody
Great.
is well
Good.
aware of what's going on, for sure.
Thank you.
So again, we all agreed that until you have the actual bids and you know, these are going to be alternates, they'll know exactly what they have to accomplish. That's why when you see most of these add-ons or alternatives in here, they're items that could be done, or won't be needed until the tail end of the project, so they have ample time to see what they can get or can't get. That's part of the process.
And just one more clarifying question. So you are intending that private fundraising provide any extras on the list and
At this-
anything beyond the,
At this point, yes,
okay.
but that's all open for discussion also.
And the discussions would be
Okay.
happening,
In other words, what I gotta remind you, we need to come up with $1,078,835,000 for a basic building. Where that comes from, we haven't made that decision either. So, to get a building with all these add-ons, without the add-ons here, we need $1,078,835. That's today. Once the bids come in, who knows, maybe we'll get lucky and it'll be only down to $1 million.
And one final question. Is there any intention to approach the Grand Traverse County and that they have their citizens represent a large share of the users?
The question has been asked.
And they have been approached.
They will be
Multiple
approached,
times.
I am sure.
Yeah, they've been part of this process through the whole thing.
And I've been a part of that process back in the spring, you know, and they said, give us numbers, we'll see what we can do. There's absolutely no promises.
Right.
They've got 250,000 on the table. I think that's all they have, isn't it? If I remember correctly.
I do not.
I remember it. It's been a while since I looked at it. They have committed $250,000.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. Yes.
I had a follow-up tree question prompted by public comment, and I apologize if we've seen this already, but I would anticipate that probably not till close to a final design, that there'll be a landscape design that will include new tree plantings.
That was included as part of the PUD action.
Oh, it was included, okay.
It was.
If an email reminder with a link could be sent to us, as far as that tree plan, and that way it can be shared with the public again as well.
And there will be a little bit of a update. They're working with Michelle Hunt on terms of the species, so we have diversity and so forth. So, but the plan that was part of the PUD is essentially the plan. There's just going to be some final site plan.
Okay. And the reason asking is if whatever number of trees are coming down, not a direct replacement because it takes decades, but that there is anticipation in the future that there will be canopy.
Correct, and it was all, again, this was a public process, approved at the UD level, planning commission, city commission, not, we've gone there. We'll continue to.
Yes.
Just to close this out, we'll be back to the city commission once we have bids back and we have a recommendation ready. Thanks to Michelle and Tim and Colleen, and I'm not sure who else, all help for that, Frank. We have a story map that went online today that kind of walks through this project, so feel free to share that with folks that have questions. Maybe doesn't get into a ton of detail, but it gives you folks the idea of the path that we took to get here, has information, budget, where to go for more questions. But you can expect to see us in August.
Yeah, so
August.
bids will be received August 4th. We'll have a period of time, we'll evaluate about a week to prepare for a city commission meeting. 21st of August would be the time that we propose that it be provided to the city commission for decision.
Is the story map on the city website?
City website, yeah.
Thank you.
And there's a link in Nate's cover memo on this item, so it's a quick spot to find it.
There'll be an updated, we're going to roll the version that we worked on so that it's live with current what's there now prior to having this meeting.
I see.
So now that we've had this meeting, you've shared all the information, and then we'll put the story map update out as soon as Colleen can. I know she's created the, so we'll do a quick review and then try to get that.
All right, thank you for the update. Look forward to seeing how the bids come. Okay, I'll open this up for any other public comments. General public comment.
I'd like to say something about the impervious pavers. Why are you spending the money to use impervious pavers when the previous planning director, who used to recommend and inform the planning commission that studies have shown they don't work?
They still meet criteria
they fill in.
Impervious, for pervious surface area.
What?
They still meet criteria for pervious surface area, which reduces the amount of impervious surface that is in the site plan.
There you go. All right, thank you for your question. All right, unless there's any other comment, I'll call this adjourned, study session adjourned. Thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone. Take lunch to go.
The watering to the ground, just let it go in front.
I've got Frank.
Going through the pavement.
Thank you, Matthew.
Sounds like the cracks in the sidewalk, the grass is growing.
They were fundraising.
Eventually become-